Good morning. We resume our proceedings. This is day 2 of second round of the public hearings. We have a food lovers market today, so welcome. I will hand over to evidence leader, Mr. Derek Bowles.
Hi there, good morning. Firstly, on behalf of the technical team, I'd like to thank you for coming through today and also for your continued participation in the inquiry. I'll just ask, please, that you state your names and designation within Food Lovers as well for the record.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, panel members. My name is Mirella Gastaldi. I'm the Group Legal Advisor to the Food Lovers Market Group.
Okay, good morning. I'm Vito Polera, Head of Fresh at Food Lovers Market.
Thank you very much. Maybe just in terms of housekeeping, the way we've structured today's session is we'll divide the session into 2. You'll be allocated 30 minutes up front just to maybe tell us a bit more about Food Lovers and your business. The second portion of the session will then be run by the technical team. I'll lead some questions based on your submissions and also some of the information we've gleaned from the inquiry so far. As I said, I'd just like to note as well that you have made, substantial submissions to the inquiry already, and we thank you for that. You can consider those as being read, but maybe just for purposes of a public participation process such as this, I'd like to cover some of the same ground that you've covered there. But I am mindful of your time as well. I don't want to cover too much of it, but and also the confidentiality that you may have claimed as well. So if you do feel that I'm veering into some confidential territory, just please feel free to stop me, and then maybe through the chair we can decide how we will progress from there. We can go into an in-camera session as well, but I think if we do that, we'd like to leave that for the end. Just makes it a little bit easier. But I think for the most part as well, we just like to keep this as general as possible without having to go to that. I think it just adds credibility to the public process as well. Okay, so you'll notice there's a laminated thing in front of you. If I can maybe just ask you, firstly, if you have any objection to taking the oath or affirmation.
I have no objection.
No objection.
Great, thank you. Then if I can just ask you to just read from that individually, and then you will be sworn in and we can proceed from there. Thank you.
I swear that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I swear that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
All right, thank you very much. So I think the first theme that I'd like to cover is essentially an hypothesis that was covered in the terms of reference, which is essentially that there was a concern that the growing trend towards a direct contracting model, an integrated supply model, will result in the further erosion of the NFPMs and the income base of the NFPMs as well, which would lead to the eventual collapse. I'd just like to hear Food Lovers' views on that hypothesis.
Vito, I think I'll hand that over to you to address. Thank you.
So to answer your question, from a Food Lovers Market point of view, we have no intentions of ever leaving the national fresh produce markets as long as they are functioning.
Excuse me, sir. I just want to, sorry to interrupt you and evidence leader. I just want to establish, if you don't want to, they're not going to be making any opening remarks. Didn't hear you saying anything about that. Whether they
actually completely forgot.
Waive that themselves.
That's my mistake. No.
Okay,
all right, maybe let's start with that, and then we'll jump into my questions. Thank you. Sorry.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the panel members. And we'd also like to thank you for affording us this opportunity to participate in the public hearings today. I'm just going to be giving a brief introduction to the Food Lovers Market Group and an overview of our business, particularly in relation to our participation in the fresh produce value chain. The Food Lovers Market Group had its inception in 1993, and that was with the opening of our first fruit and veg city store in Cape Town. In the initial years, our fruit and veg city stores had a predominantly fresh offering. Really wasn't much of a grocery or butchery, bakery offering in those stores. There was, however, a brand shift that took place in 2005, and that is when we migrated from our Fruit and Veg City brand into our Food Lovers Market brand and opened the first Food Lovers Market store in Johannesburg. Currently today, we have 88 Food Lovers Market stores across South Africa, and of those, 31 are franchised stores. In addition to these stores, the Food Lovers Market Group consists of 7 Food Lovers Eatery stores, 330 Fresh Stop convenience stores, which are located on the forecourts of Astron and Caltex branded fuel service stations. We have 35 Market Liquor and Diamonds Discount Liquor stores. We have 260 Seattle Coffee Company outlets across the country. FECI is our import and export business. And then we have 2 meat processing facilities and a small food production business. So with all of that together, the Food Lovers Market Group is the largest privately owned retailer in South Africa. As I mentioned, we had a brand shift from Fruit and Veg City to Food Lovers Market, which means that our stores now have a more complete grocery offering to our customers. But with that being said, the fresh produce department is really the cornerstone and the core of our business. And it's within our top 3 categories alongside butchery and grocery departments. Providing our customers with a wide range of affordable fresh produce really is the driving force of our business, and it really is summed up in our business purpose, which is to provide our customers with fresh, healthy food, affordable, healthy food for generations to come. From a procurement perspective, I think we've intimated this in our submission. We do operate a dual procurement model, which means we procure both off the national fresh produce markets and from direct suppliers as well. We operate a dedicated team, a centralized buying team that has buyers across the regions in South Africa, and they are responsible for procuring from both of these channels. In terms of the proportions of fresh produce that we procure from the fresh produce markets versus direct suppliers, this is currently sitting at 40% from fresh produce markets and 60% from direct suppliers. This is impacted by seasonality, so during the summer months, we do procure a larger volume of stone fruits and table grapes from direct suppliers, so that shifts to about 75% direct supply during those months. We also have a third but much smaller procurement or leg to our procurement model, and we allow corporate-owned and franchise stores to procure directly from local farmers that operate in close proximity to their stores. This is obviously more prominent in the outlying areas, but we do have a number of urban stores that also procure directly from smaller localized farmers that operate on the outskirts of the urban areas. From a distribution perspective, we operate 5 distribution centres. These are located in Johannesburg, Cape Town, Gqeberha, East London and Durban. So these distribution centres are responsible for receiving the fresh produce that we procure either through the markets, the fresh produce markets, or from direct suppliers, and then distributing them to our network of stores. Each distribution centre also has a pre-pack division, which pre-packs some of the fresh produce we procure for retail purposes, and then that also gets distributed to our stores. And then just touching on logistics, we obviously require our farmers to be able to transport their produce to our distribution centres. That's obviously excluding those localised farmers who supply directly to our stores. We, however, are responsible for transporting the produce that we procure off the fresh produce markets to our distribution centres, and then also distributing to our network of stores, and that is at our cost. From a food safety perspective, obviously compliance with food safety and all the legal requirements relating to that is important to us. And we do have certain minimum requirements that our fresh produce suppliers must adhere to. So from a food safety management perspective, the farms where the produce is grown must have implemented a food safety management system, and that must have been assessed against a local GAP intermediate level. The same applies for any pack houses. They must be in possession of a certificate of acceptability from the local authority and also have had their facility assessed against a local GAP intermediate level. And then any products that is packaged and labelled for us by suppliers must obviously adhere to legislative requirements. So in a nutshell, that is our business and our group and our fresh produce business. In terms of answering questions relating to the fresh produce business and the procurement models, I will defer to my colleague, Mr. Polera, and any compliance or regulatory queries you might have, I will address. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, apologies for jumping in the gun there. But maybe I can revert back to that initial question about the shifts. And I think, firstly, Food Lovers is probably uniquely placed relative to the other large retailers in that you do have that dual model, essentially. But maybe just to go back, so I mean, you did indicate that you've got no intention of moving away from the NFPMs. But maybe just as a start, can you sort of describe the process at the NFPMs and how it's working, how it's operating, and the level of, or the standards at least that are applicable to the NFPMs? We've obviously received a lot of submissions from the NFPMs themselves, and maybe just describe the sort of picture on the ground.
Okay, so if the fresh produce markets at the current stage, if I'm going to answer and you can direct me if I'm going wrong, in terms of the offering and the agents that are there, you get a great offering. As a buyer, you have to be careful of what you purchase. Obviously, you see what you purchase, and then we also have a system of, after that purchase, when it comes out, we have a receiving check. And it does happen in instances where what you bought is not what you received, so it then gets returned. In terms of the current state, and I'm going to just touch on, I think that the markets could spend a little bit more money on lighting. They could spend a little bit more money on cleaning up their floors. The produce we buy is on pallets, which is a plus because it doesn't touch the floor, and things like that. The entrance and exits aren't that accessible, which makes it difficult. I'm going to refer to the Johannesburg fresh produce market. We had an instance in December where they were out of electricity for a week. It makes it very difficult for you to support and buy. That means cold rooms are off. Guys were getting generators to the floors to operate the computer system, but as a buyer, you have to step back and say, okay, I'm going to refer to my directs. Why do we do the two model purchasing? It's all about volume. So often you can't get enough volume on your direct order. If you come to the morning, our buyers are normally on the markets from about 4:30, 5 in the morning, and that's actually to procure your shortfall. That's why we operate the dual system. Take it back to 1993, we only operated on the markets. That's how it led. More and more farmers approach retailers to come direct in terms of they guarantee that the stock they packed for that day has got a home. You don't necessarily take everything, but you take part of it. They guaranteed that they've got a shelf space. And as I said, we have a model where our stores don't have to commit to a volume. So you can wake up in a morning and need 4 pallets of potatoes, or you can wake up in a morning and need 15 pallets of potato, depending on the promotion, the price, and whatever's happening in the current state.
So if I understand you correctly, it was actually the farmers that approached the retailers in that respect, or was it a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. It's a bit of both. When, as a buyer, you're not getting enough and you see a producer's product on the floor, the next step is to contact him and say, how can we develop a relationship so that I can get more of your product? So I wouldn't say it's only from their side, no.
Thank you. I mean, you did touch on it, but maybe if you can describe Food Lovers' experience from way back when in '93, over time procuring supply of fresh produce from the NFPMs to present day. I mean, you're currently sitting at a 60-40 split roughly, from 100%. Just maybe walk us through that timeline and the history.
I think things evolved. I'm not sure why. If I take the Johannesburg fresh produce market, carries a massive range. It's probably one of the biggest markets that carries the most range. It's most accessible to any retailer or wholesaler. I think that if you shopped on the Johannesburg fresh produce market, you could probably fulfill your order for the day without running short on range. If we go to the smaller markets, however, it changes. I'm not sure if the evolvement comes with the increased transport costs. Is it better to keep it locally than to send it to Durban? Is it better to keep it locally than send it to the Western Cape? I started my career in the Western Cape, and if I have to refer back to that market, it probably carries the least in the range if I had to compare KZN to Johannesburg.
Okay, so in terms of ranges, that might be, but how would you compare the Cape Town market to, say, the Tshwane and the Joburg markets in terms of the quality of offering?
The quality offering is fair throughout. I mean, you know what you're buying. You can't throw that back to the agent, and when you pay the price, or you know why you're doing that. I'm saying in terms of a range perspective, you'll get much more vegetable offering in Johannesburg, Tshwane, and possibly KZN. PE or Eastern Cape and Cape Town would probably be less.
And from an infrastructure perspective?
Who has the best infrastructure? They all work well. I think that the Johannesburg fresh produce market has huge potential to fix their infrastructure.
All right. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here. So what would it take for a large retailer to start procuring more on the NFPMs? So I mean, we have seen this sort of shift to an integrated supply model, and some of the other retailers that have provided us submissions have almost shifted entirely that way. So what would, in your opinion, what would necessitate, or what would it take for a retailer to shift supplies? Is it maybe a better quality offering, or?
It's a tough question in terms of, as I explained earlier, I cannot guarantee that I can, for argument's sake, if I needed 100 pallets of potatoes for a promotion. There are so many buyers attending a market. That's my competition for that 100 pallets. If today's availability is only 110 pallets of potatoes, well, I'm not going to be able to get all 110 because that agent needs to look after all his buyers. So I'm guaranteed maybe to get 20. So I don't think that anybody would ever shift 100% back to the fresh produce market.
So it's not a case then of the quality of products that are different. It's more consistency of supply and security of supply that is important.
Correct. As a buyer, as my job, I have to make sure that there is fresh produce on the shelf to be sold for the day. I have to fulfill that order.
Okay. And is there a cost benefit in procuring directly? Or is it maybe you just take some of the volatility out that you would get on a supply and demand markets such as the NFPMs?
I suppose there is a little bit of a cost benefit in terms of that the producer will deliver the product. So that's taken away from you as a retailer. When you buy in the fresh produce markets, it's got to go to a platform where you have to load it and take it to your DC. So you've got added costs of buying on the market, but I don't think that it's such a big percentage to deter you whether you buy there or not.
So the commissions that are charged on, or levied at least at the NFPMs, those charges would essentially be offset by the transport costs that is associated with that.
As a buyer, I don't know those costs. I know them because we've inquired them, but what I'm saying to you is once I've paid for the product, that's my cost. So after that is what it cost me, and it's going to now cost me another maybe 100, 200 rand to transport it to a DC or to get it off the market to the staging facility, and from the staging facility to the DC.
Okay. I'll probably move more into that in more detail a bit later, but just for now, in terms of your pricing negotiation on a direct basis, would you approach a farmer and say, well, you would be liable for the, let's call it 12% commissions that are levied against you at the NFPMs. I can offset that against perhaps a lower price for supplying me direct?
I think in your negotiations that almost happens naturally, because they are aware of those commissions and costs. Sometimes you do pay the same price as the floor, which means he's getting 12% more if we're using the 12% number. But at that stage, as a buyer, you made that decision out of, I need that stock. So it's now not about paying 12% less. It's about I'm on promotion, or I need to fulfill an order. that's what the farmer wants. So pack me the order and send it.
Okay. In terms of sort of supply and demand shocks that we see in the market, I suppose we saw it with COVID a few years ago, where large retailers are essentially forced to buy or top up from the NFPMs. What impact does that return of those large buyers, even on a temporary basis, what impact does that have on the NFPMs?
Okay, if I'm understanding you correctly, in COVID, we had increased wholesalers and people partaking on the market because it was now considered an essential service. So a lot of people started little businesses on the side.
Okay.
That did create, all of a sudden, now you're competing for more product or for procurement. And that does influence the price. The markets purely work on supply and demand. If the market's full of an abundance, you'll be paying a relatively valuable price. And if it's very short, well, it's going to the highest bidder.
Okay. You did mention the sort of gap certifications and those minimum requirements. Through some of the submissions that we've had, some of the concerns around purchasing directly from the market is the issues of traceability and compliance with those certification standards. How does Food Lovers account for those issues when you're purchasing your 40% on the markets? Do you require certification from the agents? Just maybe walk us through that process. Is it something that concerns you?
It depends how you look at that, because 90% of what you're buying direct is available on the market. So let's talk about on the fruit side, as Mariella referred to, most of those are in place. There is a service called Procon now who does inspections, does grading and so forth. I can't 100% answer to whether they ask for those things. We, however, do tell agents, should we require the information, are you able to get the information? And that answer is normally yes. I think, to be honest, the loophole is actually on vegetables. Because if it's not in a box, because everything that comes to the market has to be labelled. So there you already have a farmer or traceability. A pallet of spinach doesn't need to be labelled. A bin of cabbage won't be labelled. However, the agent can give you which farmer supplied that, what area it came from, and so forth. So is it policed 100%? I can't answer that. Do I feel it's policed 100%? No.
But you as Food Lovers don't have any concerns around that. I mean, I suppose all the produce gets sort of put together. I mean, there's no distinction between stuff that's coming in from your direct contractors versus what you're procuring on the markets. It sort of all goes into one DC, I'd imagine, and gets distributed evenly.
Yeah, that's correct. It comes from there and gets the directs and market buys go to the same DC.
Okay. Just on the price discovery process at the NFPMs, you did mention supply and demand being a critical factor, but does Food Lovers use that price discovery process on the markets as a basis for contract negotiations with suppliers of fresh produce?
We don't really have contracts, but for negotiations, yes. It's a barometer for us of where we should be. It's a barometer of for the farmer himself. Look, every single producer is linked to some sort of platform of the fresh produce market, because 90% of your negotiation starts with the market is, and vice versa. If I'm negotiating for a price, but the market is, your goal is not to give the producer the lowest price, and your goal is also to be in the middle. As Mariella said, fresh produce is a big category for Food Lovers Market, and one of our claims is that we offer value. So that's what we try and do all the time in our negotiations. But to answer that question, the market is your barometer of where you should more or less be.
Okay. So we as the inquiry, obviously, we focused on distortions within a particular market, and one of the key focus areas for us is this price discovery process at the markets. I mean, are you satisfied that the pricing the prices that are getting discovered at those markets are a reliable indicator of value pricing, or are you concerned that there might be some distortions taking place which might lead to volatility within that pricing, which is not founded or grounded in competition?
So, I think that model works very well. And I think if you're looking at the pricing from where it's been to where it's going, we have to take into account all the factors for a producer and for a retailer. So I think that we touched on the diesel price. That influences agriculture. Load shedding influences agriculture. Input costs are just getting higher. That influences the pricing. Am I comfortable where we currently are? I can say yes. There are times where it shoots above way normal and you think to yourself, this is actually ridiculous. But it's, again, supply and demand. If it shoots too high, you purchase less. As the volume starts picking up, so the price comes back to where it should be. And I think that with the national produce markets and the directs, that's what's keeping the balance the whole time. Because if you didn't have this would shoot way up.
Okay.
And if you didn't have this, the same would happen. So
you've got a checks and balance in the system, essentially.
It sort of works itself out. I mean, if I give you an example of ZZ2, refuse to do direct business. They believe that the market model determines what they should get. So, I mean, I have a very good relationship with them, but I've never purchased a product direct from their farm.
Okay. All right. And are there other examples that you can give of growers or producers that rely solely on the markets themselves?
There are a few, but
Okay.
Scratching for names.
No, that's fine.
But
That's fine.
that's a very good example. Look, 90% of your potato producers prefer to trade through the market.
Okay.
Because they want a one-stop drop. They don't want you only want 7 kilo potatoes. Because on a harvest you don't only get 7 kilo potatoes out. You get large, medium, small, medium. So you've got a truckload. You don't want to go and stop here, and here. So they just go straight to the market. They're happy with what the market does with the price, and they voice their opinion when they think the markets are too low. So
Okay. All right. So I mean, so it wouldn't be fair to say that direct contracting would be a sort of their first choice, but it depends on what your particular model is and what the produce that you're growing. So there's almost two routes to market that are available to you, which have got pros and cons to both.
Well, to speak on Food Lovers' behalf, that works for us. It keeps us competitive.
Yeah.
As I said, we fill up the volumes we short. When something's new in a season, the first place to get it is the market, not the direct contract,
Really, yeah.
because that's the test for how much am I going to get for my product.
And from the growers' side, I mean, do they prefer one over the other, or is it a sort of dual distribution model for them?
So I deal with a few suppliers who send to the market and to us, and they're happy with that. Because say they've made a price with me, they might get more on the market. It's not necessarily to say that they're going to get less.
Okay. The next question is sort of something that we've been grappling with a little bit is whether the price discoverable at the NFPMs can be used as a proxy for an ex-works price at a retailer's distribution centre. You obviously, you're uniquely placed that you've almost got a 50-50 split. From a pricing perspective and a cost perspective, I mean, do you think that's a fair comparison to make?
No.
No.
So on any given day, I could have paid a little bit less on the market and a little bit more on direct. So remembering that I placed this order the day before, I came to the market this morning and there was an opportunity to buy a product at a lower price. When it goes to the DC, by us, it probably gets averaged. So if that helps you, I would say yes. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if you came to our DC, there wouldn't be this massive gap of what we were paying direct or on the market.
Okay.
It will be minimal.
All right. I'm going to probably come back to that a little
That's
bit.
fine, yeah.
But I think moving on to our next theme is the role of SMME and HDP growers and the procurement side from food lovers. So, what proportion of fresh produce is procured by food lovers? Sorry, let me start that again. What proportion of fresh produce that you're purchasing is being purchased from SMME, HDP growers?
Okay, I don't have a percentage for you.
Yeah.
It's definitely on our books. As Mirella alluded to, on the outlying areas, it's more to the store direct. On a national level, I've probably got about 7 to 8 suppliers that supply us. So and then we have a program that we run every year, which is called the Seeds of Change, which is specifically for SMEs. So far, we've had a bigger success on the grocery side than we have on the fresh side. But we run it every year where candidates apply. They follow a certain criteria and then get selected by a panel to come and attend a day where they come and sell their product to all the buyers in the company. So it's groceries, fresh, dependent on the product that you have.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. We could spend more focus on it, and as I explained to Mirella as well, one of the things that we're guilty of is we don't track the purchases of the outlying stores. So if I had to go and do that exercise for you, it would take me a bit of time, and would I be 100% accurate? I don't think so.
But maybe just parking those outlying stores for now, but I'm talking about supply into your DCs, sort of the formal structures within the group.
Yeah.
You don't track that at all, hey?
No, I can give you that information. Yeah.
Is it? Maybe just for purposes of today's hearing, just a rough range.
So we get plantain bananas, we get chilies, there's a few cabbage suppliers, and I'm not sure what the last one is, but yeah.
Okay.
That's just an idea.
And through your engagements with this specific class of buyer, a class of producer, what are the main challenges that they've raised or that you've identified in procuring from SMME HDP growers?
I think funding is obviously a priority. Transportation is another factor. And then I think volume that they produce. So typically, you didn't want to focus on the outline, but typically, if Food Lovers Market needs 5,000 cabbages a day, you'll often find that your SME can only deliver, say, 300 heads or 500 heads. And so you take the 500 heads, but you have to go and get the rest to fulfill your orders.
Okay.
Sorry, if I can just elaborate a little bit more on that. I think, as you know, we have, as Vito mentioned, we do have the Seeds of Change supplier development program, which has had greater success on the grocery side. I think we have focused in on what we could do to advance that program amongst SME fresh produce suppliers, and it is very challenging. And I think where we find ourselves as a business, we are a privately owned business. The amount of funding that we would need to put into expanding that program was just completely unfeasible for our business at this point in time. I think that doesn't mean that retailers like ourselves should not focus in on it, but it certainly requires, I think, a multi-stakeholder approach. As Vito said, it's issues of transportation, it's issues of land, it's input costs, water resources. So it really is going to require a number of stakeholders coming together to focus in on taking on this challenge and working together to make sure that SME fresh produce farmers and growers are given a platform or greater platform into the fresh produce value chain.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned that you don't really have a formal contracting process with your growers. Can you maybe describe in detail that contracting process that you follow and just give us some insight into that?
So when I refer to a contract, there's no written contract. We have standing relationships which we build up over the years. We don't turn anybody away that has produce to supply. We will accommodate as much as we can for people that supply. To this date, 90% of our deals and anything we've committed to has been on a handshake. Okay. So and one of our or one of the things we are taught that your word is your honor. So if we tell somebody to plant a crop of watermelons, and then we'll take it as far as we can. We'll support it, and I think that's the trust we've built up in the industry over the years. If we speak to a grower about planting sweet corn, same difference. Because we are so diverse, we shifted amongst the company. So if a buyer in Gauteng did a sweet corn program and suddenly can't take the volume that's coming out, well, then the rest of our DCs have to step in and help. So that's the one way we've built it, is on trust.
Okay. So that's obviously just a personal preference and maybe just speaks to the informality within the industry. And
yes, but I mean, if I had to sit with a grower and he wanted it in writing, then we will put it in writing.
Okay.
It's not a case of we don't want to.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but nobody's ever insisted on it. So I've never written one of those.
And this might be something that might be confidential. So just but what are the sort of typical trading terms applicable to these supply arrangements? Maybe just in terms of repayment terms and rebates.
Yeah, I think the answer to that would be confidential. So we're happy to take it.
Can we maybe just park that one
for
for now?
Thank you.
Chair, you happy with that?
That's okay. That's okay. I think you can proceed. So
All right.
we will probably right at the end.
Yes. Okay.
Deal with those issues. Yeah.
Do you require any form of exclusivity from growers to supply only food lovers, or maybe just a certain percentage of the offtake going to food lovers?
No, we don't.
Okay. Same for volume commitments as well.
No, look, volume commitments on exclusivity. Good luck, because if it doesn't come out, it's not coming.
Yeah.
So, and if there's too much, where are you going with it? So no, nothing like that.
So that's just a symptom of the unpredictable nature of farming. Am I right? That it's difficult to.
Correct. Look, I can't speak for my competition. I know that they do have it in place, but you yourself know there's loopholes to that as well. So is exclusivity actually something that any retailer can have? I don't think so, in my opinion.
And without getting into too much specifics, and maybe we can also come back to this later in the confidential session, but how is price determined, and how often is it negotiated with the growers?
So Food Lovers Market's model is pretty live. So I think the longest we would commit to a fixed price would be a week, but that would be linked to a promotion. So if the market changes tomorrow, the grower can change tomorrow, and vice versa.
Okay. So I mean, that's been sort of a common response that we've had, but maybe just how does that work practically on the ground? So would a farmer call you up and say, I've got, however many tons of peaches, what is the price for that now? Or is it, is the price determined and then you negotiate from that price? Or
let me rather give you this example.
Yeah.
If a farmer is sitting with 50 pallets of peaches, and the markets are full, the market price is, say, 40 Rand a box. He might approach you and say, if I don't move this, I'm going to end up throwing it away. What can you do? The answer to him would be, okay, what's the best that you can do? And you'd find a middle road. Take his volume from him and make sure that he actually at least got something for it. I think most growers prefer to work like that because they guaranteed a price. If you go to the market, It can be anything from 40 to 10 rand, depending on what quality you sent in.
Okay. And I suppose maybe my example was more ad hoc, but maybe something that is a bit more consistent in terms of the supply. How does that arrangement look?
Okay, so most growers normally know a week in advance that there's an abundance of volume coming. They will indicate to you that, can you do a promotion for me? That is where you would say, okay, do you think you'll get to X amount of pallets for the week? They say yes. You say, okay, I can do that price for the week. Can you hold that price? Yes, I can. And there the deal's done.
Okay. So that dynamic pricing is always present. It's not a case of, okay, well, I'm going to be, I mean, once again, I'm not a farmer, so maybe something that has got a little bit more consistency in supply. There's something that grows a little bit quicker, and a farmer is going to be supplying that to you on a weekly, maybe a monthly basis, whatever the case might be. You know, how do you then negotiate a price, which is a base price, and then that gets renegotiated on with every delivery, or?
The renegotiation would, okay, so you'd negotiate when you did your purchase. Mm-hmm. The renegotiation would happen in the instance of the farmer indicating there's volume, you're not taking enough. Then the buyer would say, okay, what can you do for me so that I can promote it? Okay, so that's actually when the renegotiation would happen. If you're planning a month-end promotion, 2 weeks prior to that, you would try and, at that stage, you actually try and secure volume and an indication of price, because you can't predict 2 weeks in advance what could happen, if that helps you. But I mean, what I'm trying to say is that our business is daily. We're on the markets daily. We're talking to the grower daily. We're ordering daily. So, and as I said to you earlier, a grower knows when the market price is up. He's never phoning you to tell you that the market price dropped. That's when we're phoning them. So it's basically you're giving each other the constant information all the time.
Okay. So it wouldn't be like a normal supply agreement where there's volumes being pumped out of a manufacturing process and it's relatively stable. This is just all over the show all the time, and you've got to be quite dynamic in the way you approach it from both sides. Is that accurate? Correct.
Even your pre-packed products. If you're packing diced butternut, you can't hold it at 20 rand a packet for the year, because there are times where a bag costs 100 rand and there are times where a bag costs 20 rand. So that's forever changing as well.
Okay.
You don't just keep it there. Well, I can't speak for everybody else, but we don't. We are constantly watching what's going on. We're constantly adjusting to I mean, as I said, one of our I can't find the word for fresh is to offer value. Okay. And if you want to make that statement, you've got to keep offering value.
Sure. So
you keep adjusting according to what's happening. Sometimes we get pipped when it stays high, because then we actually can't compete, but that you win on the swings and the roundabouts.
Sure. So maybe as a general proposition, farmers are not in a sort of weakened bargaining position relative to a retailer such as yourselves. They've got options, they've got countervailing power. Is that accurate?
If I speak for myself, we do not hold a gun to your head at all on a price. And if we ask for a promotion, it is entirely up to you whether you can do that promotion, whether it's going to be profitable for you. If you want to walk away, then we walk away. If we know we can't get the volume, we drop the line. If we know we can't get the commitment, we drop the line. We'll rather trade as normal.
Okay, thank you. Just the factors that Food Lovers considers when negotiating prices with the growers. I know you covered it in your submission, but maybe just, if you can, just list what are the factors that goes into that price.
So, if I'm negotiating a price, it's about, again, the market will determine what I'm offering. And as I just said before, I never push a grower into a bottom price. The grower makes the decision on whether he wants to let the produce go or not. That is the basic principle for all buyers. It's about procuring stock as well. And like I said to you, we have the obligation of putting it on the shelf. So I don't get into a situation where somebody's unhappy with what I'm paying them. I do get into a situation where I bought a product on the market for a low price. But that is then shifted to the agent. I didn't push him to that point. He's asking me to get the volume off his floor.
Okay, thank you. And then just dealing with large commercial growers versus your SMME HDP growers, is there any difference in the process that you follow when dealing with those two sort of groups?
Off the cuff, no, but I mean, I'll just answer that we do offer better payment terms to SMEs.
Is it? Are you able to discuss that
No,
now?
I'll just leave it there. You can discuss it in the other. Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, but we do offer better terms to them.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on to GAP certification now, and this is something that's quite new to us when we first started out. But maybe if you can just describe what GAP certification is specifically.
So I will take that. So I think GAP certification is an international standard that is utilized in the agricultural industry worldwide. In South Africa and in other developing countries around the world, they have developed a capacity building program, which is called Local GAP, and that allows obviously to get to full-blown GAP certification is time-consuming and by all accounts a very expensive exercise. So for smaller farmers, they've developed this capacity building program, which allows a producer to move through various levels with the ultimate aim of them getting to global GAP certification. As a company, we don't necessarily require full GAP certification, although I think the vast majority of the suppliers or farmers that we deal with do have GAP certification. But if you as a producer are unable to achieve a GAP certification, we will accept a local GAP intermediate level. It's an assessment at an intermediate level. Once you have that, we don't require you to move on within a specific time period to full GAP certification. We are happy for you to remain at that intermediate level.
So would you prefer global GAP over local GAP, or is it not really an issue for you?
So we don't have a preference. Obviously, if you have a GAP certification, that is fantastic, and as I said, probably 80 to 90% of our suppliers do have that. But if you only have the means and the resources to achieve a local GAP intermediate level assessment, then we will accept that.
Okay. Maybe just for the benefit of the public as well, what is in practical terms, what is the difference between a global GAP certification versus a local GAP certification in terms of a tick box exercise? Right.
So I don't have I'm not a technical expert, so that might be something, a question to rather aim towards a technical expert. My understanding is that just from a resource and compliance perspective, the requirements are the bar is not as high when it comes to local GAP, and it is more achievable. But remember, the aim being that it is a capacity building program, so you would start at a basic level, then move on to the intermediate level, and then ultimately, once you're in a position to undergo a full GAP assessment. But yes, I think it's a more technical question. So we're happy to take that back to our technical experts and to get that information.
Don't stress. It's just an interesting point. Sure. Why has Food Lovers opted to choose local GAP over say, global GAP? Is it part of that optimization process that you're talking about now?
Yeah, I think and I'll let Vito chip in, it maybe comes down to the volume issue again, is that if you're restricting yourself only to producers that have GAP certification, you're going to struggle to fulfill some of those volumes. I think we also feel that from a food safety perspective, if you're at a local GAP intermediate level, that your produce is you pretty much there's not much difference in the safety standard between the produce produced on a farm that has local GAP assessment, intermediate assessment, versus a farm that has global GAP certification.
Okay, I think you just answered my next question. So, but would you consider it a barrier for entry to specifically HDP and SMME farmers, that sort of global GAP, or at least the GAP certification process itself?
Sure. I mean, I think again, anecdotally, I've heard we understand that it is a very high standard, and there is a significant investment that a farmer would need to make to be able to achieve GAP certification. And it's,
even a local GAP,
Well, at least local gap, you start at the basic level and you
Yeah.
can move up over a period of time. So it's also not just the financial investments that you need to make. It is also the period. You've got to build up records and documentation over a period of time. So it's not something that you can achieve, in a couple of months. It is a year-long process, a couple of years-long process.
And do you provide assistance to SMME HDP growers, maybe in terms of that corporate social responsibility program you're talking about, in assisting these particular farmers in achieving that?
So I think when I mentioned earlier our Seeds of Change
Yes.
program, we've had greater success on the grocery side. There those SME suppliers in the grocery space, we've provided a lot of assistance to, from in terms of interacting with our buyers and our technical experts in the business. We don't have the same resources in the fresh produce side, so we haven't really made inroads into that space yet.
Okay. So in your view, what can be done to uplift the specific grower class to allow them to increase their participation in the formal retail market for fresh produce?
I think as I alluded to earlier, I think it's going to take a multi-stakeholder effort. It's not something that retailers can do on their own. I think it will require participation and commitment from funders, from government, from retailers, logistics suppliers, service providers. So it's not something that a single participant in the fresh produce value chain can do on their own.
Sure. So we've heard about the Spar Rural Hub, which is out in Zanin. We were fortunate enough to go out there. It was quite an amazing experience for all of us. But do you think that system might be effective in assisting these specific growers in their informally participating in this retail market? Is it something that you would look into, or maybe in collaboration with the other retailers?
Yeah, sure, certainly, and I think you're correct. Those rural hubs and the work that SPAR's done has been amazing. That was something we looked at a few years ago, and it proved to be just completely unfeasible and prohibitively expensive for us as a company, a privately owned company. But I think if you look at the challenges that HDP and SME suppliers face, the biggest one being lack of access to transport, achieving these food safety certifications, which are required. If those resources are pooled and into hubs or centralized areas that are close to their farms, it will certainly, we believe, be a massive benefit to them and allow them access to the market. But again, I think that will take a collective effort from various stakeholders to achieve that.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Just moving to sort of servicing the rural areas in South Africa. Does Food Lovers have a presence in these rural areas? Is it sort of a target market for you, or do you focus more on the urban areas?
So we've got a spread between the urban and rural areas. We've got a number of stores in Limpopo, in Mpumalanga. We've all the way through to the northwest, so from Rustenburg to Mafeking. And then in KZN, we mostly are focused in the urban areas, and the same in the Western Cape. But yes, we've got a presence in the northern outlying areas.
Okay. And you mentioned the sort of formal requirements in supplying Food Lovers would be, well, it's almost a dual model. You can supply direct to the DC itself, or you can supply to those outlying stores directly. Mm-hmm. Maybe you just talk us through how the price then is negotiated at those outlying areas.
I'm going to hand that over to Vito because he's got insight into that.
Okay, thank you.
That would purely be between the store and the grower, and the store would basically use it from a cost price that they're currently paying. So again, it refers back to the market or to the directs to get to that price.
Okay. And I mean, so the grower has a choice then. I mean, they can approach those stores directly. I mean, we're going back to that Zanin store, for instance.
Yes.
So you don't have satellite distribution centres or smaller distribution centres?
No.
So it's either DC or straight to those smaller stores?
Yes.
And from a pricing perspective, I mean, does it...
It's negotiated between store and grower.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not determined,
I'm saying that the barometer would be what the current cost is.
Okay.
So that would be the barometer that the store manager would use to negotiate with the farmer.
All right. Okay. Sorry, just bear with me for a second. So just in terms of pricing across the group, do you determine prices firstly at head office level for your retail stores, or is it promotions that are done at
Yeah, so the way it works is it would be regional,
okay.
dependent on which DC you're buying from, because the price in Johannesburg is not necessarily the price in Cape Town. National deals will be, which are on TV, is throughout the country, and they adhere to that. That's on a weekly basis. Leaflets are also done strategically in the regions. Again, because if I had to purchase in Johannesburg, I have to put a transport cost, same way back. So when we do our promotional planning, we will take all those things into account, and so we call it inland, coastal, KZN, Eastern Cape. That would all have different pricing besides the national deals that were done. On a day-to-day basis, we send out a recommended selling prices to all retailers on a weekly basis. So we will recommend probably about the top 30 lines of fruit and veg, and say that that's where you should be in terms of a value offering.
And do you enforce that, or is it sort of just a guideline?
So again, the stores that are closer to DC, it gets enforced. The stores that are outline, again, there's a transport cost. So it's marginally out, but it's a guideline.
Okay.
It's a guideline of what they can sell for.
Yeah. Just to add, in terms with our franchisees, that we only require them to adhere to promotional pricing. So although we would share the recommended pricing with them, they're at liberty to price as they see fit.
Okay. And I'm wondering if this maybe can be dealt with later, but how does Food Lovers determine the prices from the DC to the retail store? So you mentioned you've got the prices that are coming in from, or at least the cost of servicing a DC. What does the price look like from the landed price at your DC or ex-works price there versus the price being charged to the end consumer at your retail stores?
Thanks. I think if we could take that or hold that over until
that's right.
The session at the end. Thank you.
DC, I think maybe I'm done. Maybe if you want to maybe take some questions now in the public session, then we can park everything for the confidential session that I've still got. Or
All right, no, thank you, Mr. Boss. I think we'll proceed for now. Mr. Mare, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. I do have a number of questions, and I think I'm mostly returning to the topics we've already discussed. So it's not necessarily new material, but I want some expansions and some further explanations. Again, this is really just to test our understanding and get your views on this. I think the first thing that I have in mind is you mentioned that you allow corporate and your franchisee stores to procure from regional suppliers. So they have the option of procuring supply from a distribution center, but then they also have the option to say, well, there's a local farmer that supplies nice cabbages, so I'll supply from them. And that accounts for both corporate and your franchisee stores. Is that correct? And so what is your experience in what that sort of system does to allow access for SME and HDP farmers?
Okay, so the motto from the beginning of Food Lovers Market or Fruit and Veg City was that if there were local suppliers, that's how that was born, is that you support the local suppliers. It also makes sense that if you're in Zanin, instead of pulling bananas from the fresh produce market, you could buy the bananas, avos, and so forth there and support the local community. So that's how that rule was allowed.
Right, and does Food Lovers Market have any sort of requirements to say, well, you might be small, you might be large, you might be medium, but if you want to supply into corporate or franchise, you need this requirement, this volume, minimum this. Are there any sort of standard requirements that you require?
There will be no volume requirements. It will be about what the store can handle. So, for argument's sake, if a grower came with 20 lugs of avos in the Zanin area, that store would possibly buy that. If he came the next day with 100 lugs, if the store didn't need it, he wouldn't purchase it. So it would again be an ordering basis once the store and that grower had developed a relationship of rather bring me twice a week or rather bring me 3 times a week, and I take small volumes and constantly take. SMEs can have the same approach, and as Mirella alluded to, is the local gap came in with the health and safety as a retailer that you have to have. So that's where that came in. I mean, if we didn't have those rules, yeah.
Yeah, I think, on that point, I was about to follow up. On that point, your observations on the tension between I'm an SME farmer, it's costing me money to get even a local gap certification. There are inspectors that, you need to pay to come inspect, and, all these requirements that, build facilities, have accounting standards, those sort of things. That's costing them money. On the other end of the spectrum, we're saying it's about food safety and food quality. So in your observations, and particularly the SME HDP view, how does one strike a balance between those tensions?
I think that is the challenge. Ultimately, we have a responsibility and obligation to provide safe food to our consumers. That's a non-negotiable. As much as we would like to deal with an SME farmer if they have made no strides towards implementing a food safety management system on their farm and starting the journey towards at least at a minimum achieving a local gap intermediate level assessment, it will be very difficult for us to procure from that farmer. I think, what does it boil down to? Probably it boils down to resources. And that is the only way that challenge or striking that balance can be overcome, is to apply resources, and it shouldn't just be on the retailer to do that. Again, as I said, I think it should be the various stakeholders in the value chain to assist in that happening. Right.
So in terms of, let's say it's a food safety standard. It's a quality standard. And there are obviously different standards. We said global gap is sort of the highest standard, the most difficult to achieve, also the most expensive to achieve. And I think what we've seen from Food Lovers is that you allow farmers, whether they're SME or not, to say, well, you can start at sort of a local gap, which is an easier intermediate level, which is easier, and then build yourself up. So that's maybe one of the ways would you agree to say you can accommodate SMEs to not sort of fixate on global gap necessarily as the sort of only possible standard that you have to comply with. What I'm interested in is to say, if you do make that, which you guys do, does that have any impact on quality, on food safety, on what the consumer buys in the store at the end of the value chain?
In our view, we don't believe that it impacts negatively on the safety of the product and on the quality of the product. So, we haven't, we can't speak for other retailers, but that is our view.
Yeah. All right. My second area is, again, a sort of perception that the quality that is purchased from an NFPM is inferior to the quality that you buy at a retail store. Perhaps it has to do with packaging, perhaps it has to do with the sizes of packaging or whatever the factors might be. But I think there's a perception that we've come across as the inquiry to say, well, only what you get at a retail store, and it doesn't matter what brand, so it can be Food Lovers, is just a better quality. So I'm a consumer and I just want nice-looking potatoes. I have to do that and make sure that I go to a retail store. What is your observations on sort of quality standards at the NFPMs?
I think I alluded to it in the infrastructure that they could spend some money on, but I disagree with that statement of that you get inferior stuff at the market. You can get inferior stuff if you purchase inferior stuff. Inferior stuff if you purchase inferior stuff. There are certain commodities that which I also answered in the question, that you have to double check, because often you will buy a product and when it gets to your staging facility, it's not what you bought. And that's basically the agent or the guy who loaded the wrong pallet or so forth. Are there two types of qualities on the fresh produce market? Yes. Because they don't move everything that gets delivered to them every single day. So, and that is the challenge as a buyer there, is that when you're buying there, that you are buying the best quality off the floor. And I think that you can put the steps in place to make sure that you do. To be honest with you, does it slip through our system? Yes. But then we return it. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. But just to confirm, I mean, it's in the discretion of the buyer to say, I want the best quality, then it would be available. Or I want, I'm not too concerned about quality, it would be available. Or I'm fine with any quality, just get me the cheapest price. I think the point is whether those options are available at an NFPM.
I think you answered that yourself, and then you can take it in the price as well. If you take a pocket of potatoes that's sold for, let's say, 60 Rand, 40 Rand or 30 Rand,
Yeah.
it will be based on the grade, it will be based on the quality, and it will be based how long it's been on the floor.
Yeah.
So when you purchase that, which you give a card to book, you know what you're purchasing.
Yeah. And that quality is reflected in the price.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think something we're also interested in, and we covered some of this yesterday, is the inquiry is exploring this hypothesis that there's a perception again that retailers are becoming ever more powerful against farmers, that there's an increasing trend where farmers are getting less and less bargaining power as retailers are getting more and more powerful. So, and I think particularly we've seen this in Europe in a situation where there are no NFPMs, there's no similar structures there. All supply is channeled through retailers. Farmers are price takers essentially, to a point where farmers have now to resort to production strikes to try and enforce some form of bargaining power. So what is your experience in terms of when you bargain with farmers? I mean, would you say they still have negotiating or bargaining power? And secondly, what has the trend been? So has it been consistent? Have retailers become more powerful? Have farmers become more powerful? I'm very interested in sort of the current situation, but also the trend.
I wouldn't say that a retailer's got all the power. I actually think in our country the grower has the power because we need to eat. I think our biggest challenge is that it's a perishable product. It cannot be kept for 3 weeks in a storeroom and then brought out when needed. I think that is why the fresh produce market and the directs work so well, is in terms of that's where you decide what gets paid for your product. Secondly, as I said, no, I've never sat with a producer where I forced them to deliver anything to Food Lovers Market. And it's one of the reasons I don't have a contract. It's purely negotiated. It's an agreement. You can pick a product and mangoes, anything like that. It's either coming to us from the farmer, and when we get to the price, it was negotiated by both parties, and both parties are comfortable that they're happy with that.
Would you say that the same apply if the producer is a SME supplier, a small farmer?
100%. If you don't want a price for your product, then you have the option to go to the market. If you go to a retailer and they're not giving you what your input costs are, or even if you're now on the stage of perishable, they're not giving you just the break even, then you have the right to walk away. You should have the right to walk away.
I think it takes me to something you mentioned sort of in passing moments ago about checks and balances. But I just want to return to this. I think it's important for our understanding to understand what you mean with the checks and balances. And you were referring to, NFPMs on the one side versus retailers on the other side, and the checks and balances. Can you perhaps just expand on what you meant there?
In none of my procurement do I have a fixed price. I can't speak for my competitors or opposition. So what I mean by that is sometimes a buyer or a company will go to a grower and say to them that they'll give them X amount for the year. If that price reaches above the X amount, the retailer is scoring, I don't score. I will pay the higher price because I'm linked to the national fresh produce market. If it goes lower than that, the retailer that fixed the price no longer scores, but I have the opportunity of let's call it making back what I lost when I paid the most. If that makes sense.
It does, and I'm wondering if, and perhaps you can explain further. I mean, the sort of role of an NFPM as a sort of counterbalance to, let's say, the supposed might of a retailer. And I think it has to do, if I understand you correctly, with the fact that the farmer has an option to take his produce elsewhere if he's not happy with the farmer, as long as he's not to the retailer, as long as he's not tied to that retailer.
Well, if you're tied into a contract, that's when the questions you asked me of, you're tied to a volume, you're tied to a price. If you have that with a retailer, then if it's a contract, you have to live up to that. So in a case where the national fresh produce market is at a high, you can't deviate your product because you've got a contract.
Yeah, but if the contract is non-exclusive, so the contract doesn't tie in the farmer and say you can only supply to me as your retailer, you're free to go wherever.
Well, then you can go to the fresh produce market if it's on a high.
Yes, and just in your experience, as a buyer, you deal with farmers. Is that something that they would do? So if I'm a farmer and I actually, supply into a retailer and it's nice, and I can say I supply retailer X. But something happens, would I realistically say it's feasible for me to truck my produce to an NFPM?
As I said, if the market price is up, the grower knows about it, and there's definitely a few pallets going that way. Yeah. There's no doubt about it.
Okay. Another topic I want to return to is the sort of difficulties as an SME, and I know you're answering this from a buyer perspective, but that's the perspective I'm interested in. So say, for example, I'm an SME and I want to supply into retail. From your perception as a buyer, what is sort of stopping me? What is stopping a retailer from doing more business with SMEs? Is it a volume issue? Is it a quality issue? Sort of, why is it that SMEs are telling us that I don't have access to the retail sector?
We are quite an open book, so it's making it difficult for me to answer that because on a weekly basis we have a customer care line where I field maybe 7 requests to supply. That will get diverted to the relevant buyer in the relevant region, and that buyer has to set up a meeting with that grower or marketer or hub marketer or whatever the case may be, and then see whether it's viable to purchase from them. So I don't think we look at it as we don't want to do it. I did allude to that the volume that comes out is sometimes not what you need, but we're always happy to grow with somebody. So do you have access to or do you have the hectares to grow? Is obviously the first question. What can you grow? What have you currently got? I think something that would put a stop to it is if somebody arrives at your office and says, "What can I grow for you?" And I refer to that as, if you grow cabbage, then you chose to specialize in that. That means you chose to be the best at that. That's somebody you would like to go and work with because you want to be the best at or cucumbers or peppers or whatever it is. When you arrive at a buyer's door and say, "What can I grow for you?" and he's got all this buyers and markets that he can pick off, he's not going to think of something specific. It's also got to be, anything that you grow needs to be area specific. We all know you can't grow lychees in the Western Cape. It has to be grown in a subtropical area. I'm just using examples. So that's the things that that when you want to plant something that you need to take into account. What does the weather allow? What does the ground allow? And what am I going to be good at?
I think, on a similar point, and I think in your response you said some of the challenges faced by SMEs are things like transport, they don't have enough volumes, they don't have enough funding, water, land, load shedding, diesel costs. So those are sort of the challenges faced by SMEs in your view. So, and you also said that, look, it's difficult to find solutions because it's multi-stakeholder. There's not, you can't put the burden on just a single stakeholder in the value chain. There's a lot of moving parts here. But if we have to focus in on sort of the retail sector, what is it that a retailer can do to contribute to solving some of these problems? Assume that, we're asking the same question to everyone across the value chain and say everyone comes up with the little bit that they can do. What is the bit that in your view, a retailer can do to sort of, battle against these problems for farmers?
I think the one thing that retailers can do is information sharing and knowledge sharing and technical support. A lot of retailers have technical experts that work within their organizations. They have buying teams that sit with a huge amount of knowledge. So that is something that I think retailers can do relatively easily. And certainly that information sharing and technical support would go a long way to assist SMEs in developing in the right direction.
Right. We covered the sort of rural hub model. They sort of act as an aggregator. They sort of act as packhouse facilities, as packing facilities, sorting facilities, grading facilities. And you mentioned that sort of it wasn't feasible. So when Food Lovers assessed whether to do something similar, said it's not feasible from a financial perspective. So is sort of money the only issue? We know from other sort of rural hubs that there was international funding involved. It didn't all come from the retailer's pocket. Is money sort of the only problem? If money is available, whether it be through government or international funding or institutional investors or wherever the money is coming from, if Food Lovers has the money, would it be sort of become feasible? And obviously lots of tangents and things, but would it be from a principled position? Would it be feasible to say, look, this is a way to get access to, sort of maximize our supply chain?
Sure. Yes. Money certainly isn't the only factor that we took into account. Being a private family-run business, we're quite a lean organisation. So I think what also informed our decision was the fact that we didn't have the resources to put into it. We didn't have the enough hands to establish those rural hubs and to run them optimally. So that was an impact, that certainly impacted on our decision beyond the capital expenditure that would have needed to go into the project.
Right, so it's sort of technical expertise, human resources, that sort of thing, plus funding. Yeah. All right, something we're also interested in, and it has to do with sort of understanding the competitive dynamics, is to understand sort of who competes with who at a retail level. And some responses are fairly sort of obvious, but we don't want to assume anything. So if you can tell us perhaps who you regard as your competitors from a fresh produce perspective.
Anybody that has a fresh produce department is a potential threat to Food Lovers Market. So every retailer that you can think of that has a decent offering or has a big offering. So do I compare myself to Woolworths? No. I would compare myself to Pick n Pay, Checkers and Spar.
And what about other sort of grocery, fresh produce grocery, like informal traders, greengrocers, those sorts of retailers?
You want to be more specific?
So you might get, they're not big branded retailers like Spar or Woolworths or Food Lovers, but you get them at a corner and they have the full offering of fresh produce with eggs and some meat and that sort of thing. But it might be a family-run business. If you're saying if they have a fresh produce offering, I compete with them.
It's a potential. So we base on our stores that you should price check anybody in your area. So if you have a Spar, a Checkers, a Pick n Pay and a Woolworths and call it a Chinese foods, then you should be checking what they do.
Yeah. And informal traders, like, stalls and roadside vendors, and do you target those sort of customers that say, look, you just want a packet for today?
No, I don't know.
Right. Do you differentiate, and I think you alluded to this, do you differentiate sort of between regional dynamics? So would you say I have more competitors in this area than in that area, or I'm competing with these retailers on that specific fresh produce because it is, prevalent in that area, sort of thing? Do you have those regional dynamics?
Yes, I think we do. So as I said, if there's a company in KZN that sells fresh produce, we are always watching what's happening there, and then obviously the national brands are all around there as well. So we're checking that too.
Right. The next topic I want to get your sense in is one of the concerns we've heard is, as a general rule, we know most retailers, food lovers apart, don't, as a rule, buy from fresh produce markets. They have their direct supply chains and their distribution centres. But in case of supply shocks or massive demand and less supply because of climate conditions or whatever it might be, that those retailers then access the NFPMs, and that creates a price distortion because there's huge demand, there's the same supply there's always been, or there's even less supply because of the same climate conditions, whatever it might be. But I think the concern is that these these retailers then enter the NFPMs and prices shoot up. And that's unfair towards the usual buyers, such as yourself or any other wholesaler or other buyer that regularly trades at the NFPMs. I mean, is in your experience, in your observations, is that something that you are concerned about, that creates distortions?
I don't actually know how to answer that because it's about supply and demand. So, I mean, I think you've answered it yourself. If you suddenly come up on the market and take out a huge amount of volume, then sure, you're going to change the price. That's the dynamics of the market.
Yeah, but I guess what I want to understand is the fact that the retailer who says on a normal course I don't do business with NFPMs, but then when it suits it, it goes to the NFPMs and secures the supply and potentially upsets the balance, and creates sort of distortions for limited periods. It might be just until they leave again. Is that a concern, or is that just what you're saying? Look, that's just supply and demand. That's the way it works. Sometimes you have more supply, sometimes you have more demand, and the retailer coming in is just an instance of more demand.
I think if you don't trade on the market, then yes, it is an unfair advantage because suddenly you're just going to take away from everybody that's been there every week, like you said. It's as I explained, their buyers have the same job as me. You have to get the product on the shelf every single day. So,
yeah, I mean, we do understand it happens, very, very limited. I mean, in your experience, is that correct? It's not something that happens very often?
If you had to ask me right now, did it affect me at any time? I can't choose a day that it did.
Yeah. All right. I'm sort of drawing to an end, and we're sort of going into pricing territory here. So, again, we might cover some of this in the confidential session, but you'll indicate to me. I think what we're also very interested in is sort of pricing trends and the price transmission through the value chain. And I think the first thing I want to ask you is your observations on your own prices that you pay to farmers. So I'm not looking for specifics here, I'm not looking for specific commodities. But if you have to say, over time, what I'm paying to farmers, so your cost essentially, what I'm paying to farmers, is it going up? Is it going down? Is it spiking? Is it fluxing? What is your observations on those sorts of trends?
I think it's on the up.
You're paying more as food lovers to farmers. Do you know why?
It's linked to input costs and I mean, even if you had to ask the markets to give you an average, I think they'll give you a clear indication of the commodities that have increased, and it's basically due to the things we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So it all goes back into the product because that's either the growers break even or the difference between him making money or not, or being there next year.
So in your observation, again speaking very generally here, in your observation, it would appear that at least some of the increased input costs for farmers are making their way through to you as a buyer, in that you are paying more to the farmers.
Correct.
Yeah. And in terms of your observations from, again generally, from the cost, particularly the cost between your DC and your retail, so moving the product from your DC to your retail stores, are you observing any specific sort of cost trends in moving that product over time?
I think we're going to discuss that in the...
Yeah, if we can hold that over to the end, thank you.
And then we sort of touched on this about the input costs of farmers. I mean, are you aware of any specific input costs? And again, I know you're a buyer, but you do deal with farmers as well, and you have these relationships with farmers. I mean, your observations on, whether there are particular costs that these farmers are concerned about in terms of their input costs.
So I can't answer, but I mean, I've been a buyer for long, and I didn't know that the fertilizer that they buy was linked to the dollar. So that's an impact. Load shedding. It cuts the pack line. So the volume you get out for the day may not necessarily be the volume you would have got if the lights were on. If you've got a generator because you could afford it, you would be burning extra diesel. So that gets put back into the product. The diesel then plays to the transport costs to get it to the market or to the DC. I mean, those are just a few. So often when you're in a negotiation, packaging costs also linked to the dollar. I think it just all filters back to a cost price of, this is what I spent to produce this product.
So again, just to confirm, I mean, in your negotiations, the farmers do bring this up to say, look,
of course,
our input costs have increased, these prices on. Yeah, all right. Thank you, Chair. Covered.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Perhaps maybe we can just follow up on a few things, right? Because I know since you deal with the national, is it the fresh produce market? I think you've commented broadly on this, but how do you see their performance broadly? So are you able to, is it something that's working? Is there any sort of market in your view that you feel it's working better? If there are these challenges, what could be done to address those challenges at the markets?
So I said it, and I think that the fresh produce markets do work. They do have a place in the industry. They're definitely the barometer for the price mechanism. I just think that they can spend more money on the infrastructures, making it easy. I mean, we spoke about assisting. They could have inspectors checking product maybe. Besides Procon, maybe somebody that checks for, let's go to a customer's, a trend that's running now is pesticide residues, things like that. And they take a commission, so they could cover it in that, and that would allow more access to more growers.
Thank you very much. Now, on the relationship with agents, I assume, because you buy at the markets, what kind of relationships do you have with the agents? Are there any arrangements between yourselves and the agents you prefer to deal with?
I think as a buyer or in anything you do develop relationships with certain agents, but those relationships are based on the growers that supply that agent, if you understand what I mean. So, to give you an example, if ZZ2 supplied RSA but moved to Dapper which is another agency. If ZZ2 is my preferred product, I would move to go and buy it at Dapper. So it's really, I think, yes, you do develop friendships and relationships in the time that you buy there, because it's something you do every day and it's a natural thing, but it is linked to a grower that you sell.
Do you procure by any chance from the SME or HDP agents, when any of the markets you buy from?
If they have a product we're looking for, yes.
Have you procured? I'm just looking. As
I can answer yes, but if I had to get you a specific transaction, I probably wouldn't be able to find it. But I do know that on Johannesburg fresh produce market, we have purchased, I think it's avos and limes and products like that. But I can't get you specific transactions.
Okay, all right. No, thank you for that. But maybe we might follow up on that. Because I think
No problem. It's fine.
There's this concern of participation, at least also at the market agents level. Now, on food lovers, because in the market, just want to understand, I think, how you find yourselves access to trading spaces. I assume, shopping centers, or I don't know what your strategy is specifically, but you can share with us there. How do you find access, I think, now from the point of view of Food Lovers Market, where you wish to trade? Are you picking up any barriers in this space?
Sure. It's been a long journey, and I think if we had to take it back 15 years ago, there were certainly barriers, and there were certain shopping centres that we could not access or get into. I think I'm happy to say that has changed significantly over the intervening period, and we've got established relationships with all the significant property owners and landlords in the country. And certainly those barriers are few and far between nowadays. If there is quite often we are approached by landlords who are offering us space alongside our competitors. When we go into centres now, we are pretty much in the centre with at least one or two of our competitors in the same centre. So that has significantly improved over the last 15 years.
All right. Recently, have you had any challenges with the centres you prefer the most? Are there any centres you feel you would like to trade in, and there are some challenges?
I think possibly the one challenge that we are still facing is that not so much that we are that there's an exclusivity in place or that we are unable to access the centre. It is more that once one or two of our competitors have been placed in that centre, the space that is made available to us is not necessarily ideal for our model. So we certainly look at above 2,000 square meters for a site. If it's below that, it's not really sustainable or feasible for us. So often, once a bigger competitor has anchored a centre, there might not be sufficient space left for us in that centre. So that is really, I think, that is sort of the current challenge, but it's quite infrequent.
All right, thank you for that. And I just want to understand broadly, I think we have this question on the statement of issues, of course broadly, but we did send you specific questions as well. Just on if, in your view, if there are any features in the sector that may be impeding or restricting or distorting competition, in your view, just across the value chain. If you have picked up anything that is worth noting for this inquiry.
Thank you. I think, and we've alluded to it in our submission, but obviously with the ever-growing problem of load shedding, the entire value chain is having to invest either in alternative energy sources or having to expend a significant amount of money on diesel to run generators. As retailers, we have, through the Consumer Goods Council, we have tried to seek an extension of the diesel rebate system to retail stores. Currently, that rebate is enjoyed by producers, agricultural producers, and was recently last year extended to manufacturers. But that same extension hasn't been afforded to retailers. Our argument is that if we want to keep the cost of food low, that entire value chain should benefit from that diesel rebate. It shouldn't just be pockets of players in the supply chain. And ultimately, for whatever reason, we haven't really received significant feedback from Treasury to justify why it has not been extended to retailers. So I think that is just an issue that we would like to highlight and raise, and leave that with you for further exploration.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that. And maybe lastly, because I think we're going to close this public session, to check if you have any further submissions you would like to make to this inquiry that you have not probably emphasized on, in any of your submissions that you feel you would like to share with us.
I've got nothing further to add. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much. We will proceed to close this session. What will happen next is the inquiry. I think as we continue to do, we continue to assess the information we have. We have the indicative administrative timetable, which we constantly review, and I think based on the information and speed within which we receive this information, we may be able to still meet the targets we have set in the administrative timetable, but I think there is some residual risk to that, but we'll update stakeholders on this. This then brings us to the end of this second round of public hearings. I think there are, one stakeholder we are still engaging with, and we will update stakeholders accordingly. But our preference is for the stakeholder to participate in these hearings. So I think we might have to invoke some powers to compel the particular stakeholder to participate in these hearings. But we will update stakeholders on that. So thank you very much. We then adjourn the session. We will have another session, a closed session, to deal with submissions of a confidential nature. So thank you very much.